Welcome back to Kings of the North, the final KOTN before tonight's national championship game. Doug Lesmerises along with Bill Landis. I just want to say off the bat, Bill, 31-20. I think I have gotten in the bad habit of when my score pick pops up on the screen, I don't always say it.
Yeah.
So if I didn't say it yesterday, I apologize. I always say to you, what's your pick? But then I forget to say to myself, what's my pick?
31-20.
31-20.
Okay.
You said 31-17.
31-17 is mine, yes.
But now we're going to ask a bunch of other media friends on this show. We're going to get their quick breakdowns and analysis. Our friend Ari Wasserman stops by at the end for, of course, a little bit of a longer discussion because it's hard for Ari to share thoughts in 2 minutes, much like it is for me. But we want to start off, Bill, with a little final. I'm sorry to do this again. Somebody I saw on a Apple podcast review that somebody said, wasn't it kind of weird that Doug cried after the Sugar Bowl because a Northern team won? Yeah, it was. But this is something different, Bill. This is a little more meaningful because it's the last Cram-o-Meter of the year.
It is. Also, you weren't crying because a Northern team won. Or at least it wasn't all of that. Like, people know what happened in New Orleans, right?
No. There are extenuating circumstances, but I think also if someone said Doug cried because a Northern team won, I also think that's a factual statement. Yeah. So we do want to get to the Cram-o-Meter, but I also want to say that we have been trotting out, and I think that you and I have done shows before, and we've kind of had like little gimmicks sometimes that we do with our shows. And I think one that we can fall into here with Kings of the North is alternate names for the show. Mm-hmm. So we know the first alternate name is Philly Billy and French Vanilli. Mm-hmm. The second alternate name, which we discovered yesterday, was Two Lads in Plaid Talking Ball.
What was it? Football lads clad in plaid.
Football lads clad in plaid.
Yeah.
That's definitely. Now this is what we want. You wear a cape and people start shouting your name. By the way, just so people can see, can the people see that, Landis?
It's a little, yeah. Let me lift it up a little bit for the people. There you go.
For the people right there?
Yeah. Okay.
So that is, that's not just.
Good producing by Mike to remove the lower thirds.
Yeah.
It's good to see
so,
your cape and my basketball shorts.
Thanks. Thanks to, we'll get you a cape. We know you have some cape jealousy right now. Thanks to my daughter and my wife for printing that out and slapping it on my cape for me. So that's our second alternate name. I stumbled across our third alternate name last night. Mike, this is the photo I sent. I thought this could be Sugar Smacked Bacon, I think would be. Does that scream college football podcast to you?
It screams delicious to me.
It does scream delicious.
If we're not a delicious podcast.
So they've done a lovely job taking care of the media down here. And one of the things last night was they had Sugar Smack Bacon that you could clip and hang on a bacon tree and then eat it.
It was delicious. How much did you eat?
I failed in my clipping a lot. And every time you try to clip bacon to a tree and fail, you have to eat it or it's bad luck.
That's right.
And then this is my other alternate name. So that's the third alternate name. This is the other alternate name, which is a shirt that I've had for a while. Can people see this?
Yeah.
Mean, but 100% right. I also think you're not as mean as I am, but I think, especially in this is like how the South renames things. This is what people in the South call our show. Because I am mean.
You are. But
they also must acknowledge that this whole season, you and I and this entire show have been 100% right.
Truth hurts, man. It's in the shirt.
So the Cram-o-Meter. So we're cramming it for the last time here. I read through it every week. Mike has the graphic. We have all these numbers that we've done. I'm not going to read through quite as many of them this year. You can see this show. You can see it up there. But the main thing is that we have broken it many times. It's supposed to be 1 to 1,000. We've gone over 1 million. We've gone up to 1 billion at times. We've had Brett Bielema's head as a rating 1 week. And last week, you came up with the idea of that our Cram-o-Meter rating was the SEC logo on a milk carton.
Yeah.
How good do you feel about that today?
I feel great about it. I'm so glad we were able to execute it. I think it's fitting for the way this season has gone. So shout out to Mike for getting it done.
Shout out to Mike for getting it done. And so we are doing our final Cram-o-Meter of the season today. And I think one of the things that is true, Bill, so one of the things is that there are good people everywhere.
Sure.
And so I'm fine, but I did have so I needed to get checked out by a doctor, just precautionary, while I was down here. So I had a doctor down here, and she was just lovely. She was the best. And I always get emotional when I'm with doctors, and she was sort of was like, "What is wrong with you?" And I was like, "I'm just grateful for people like you who do real things that matter. And I'm just a podcaster. I'm just a podcaster." And she was like, "What do you podcast about?" And I said, "Well, I podcast about college football." And she said, "I'm an Alabama fan." So after the wonderful people, again, I'm fine. It was just precautionary. Got checked out. I'm all good to go. But there's all the people over there just taking care of, who am I? And people take care of you.
Yeah.
So I am not here to cram it on the good people of Atlanta, Georgia, who are fans of all kinds of Southern teams, who are just lovely folk. But their football team still can cram it. So I have a suggestion.
Okay.
And you have been our leading cramologist this season. You put a lot of thought into it. You have great reasons. You have great numbers that mean something. And I would like to humbly suggest this, that our final Cram-o-Meter of the season be 1,000. Because we said it was a 1 to 1,000 scale. The South has been so far up its own cram hole this year that it has forced us at times to go into the millions and the billions and a milk carton logo. But in the end, they have suffered enough. There are some fine folks down here. And so we can just max it out on what it was intended to be all along, which is, in the final analysis, the South can cram at 1,000.
I'm in favor of that. I didn't have a meaningful number necessarily. I like imagery as well, so my suggestion was just going to be this.
Well, I'm not against that.
So you have the choice to make, I suppose. If you would like the Cram-o-Meter, when people look back on it over history, just be you dressed as you currently are, or 1,000. Either one's fine with me. I'll let you make the choice.
God, you're appealing to my ego here. Just might be this.
Yeah.
What if it was this? The North has risen. Like, if it's that, that is, wow, that is appealing. Also, I'm sick of my own face, as many of you are. This is like the people are like, this is why I listen in my car. I don't want to watch this. Let's go with 1,000.
Okay, 1,000 works for me.
In the end, and listen, I am going to be fascinated. We're certainly going to talk about it in the offseason. Carson Beck going to Miami. Georgia hitting the portal hard.
Real hard.
Right? Like, Bama's going to come back. Like, Kalen DeBoer, has to do something next season, right? Like, the things that are happening. What Brian Kelly, can you imagine what Brian Kelly at LSU is feeling right now? I don't know what that's going to mean for LSU.
I haven't. I've enjoyed it.
You've thought about it? You just lie in bed. So you said, TikTok got banned for 7 hours, but you said that sometimes you like to lie in bed and just skim TikTok before you fall asleep. So the one night when it was banned, instead you just were lying there thinking about what Brian Kelly's life is like right now.
Yeah, just how terrible he feels about all of this. And the fact that he had to come out, and I think he had to give a quote to somebody that said, I never said you couldn't win a national title at Notre Dame. That's not why I left. Bro, it's what you said, and it's why you left, and now you have to watch it. Just sit back and watch it. It was great.
I think what he said was, he didn't say that Notre Dame couldn't win a national title. He said, I can't win a national title at Notre Dame. Yeah. This game is an 8.5-point line as we stand here Monday afternoon, 44.5 for the total. That it has settled at over a touchdown. Are you surprised at all that this is where we stand?
A little bit, just because Notre Dame obviously hasn't lost since it lost to Northern Illinois. It has won rather lopsidedly. I actually think Notre Dame scoring average-wise is ahead of Ohio State this year. So I guess on one hand I understand why it is the way it is, because we've seen the ceiling for Ohio State, and I think it is probably more than a score better than Notre Dame. Even perhaps Notre Dame's best, because Ohio State's best is quite good. But it feels a little large for a national title game. It does feel a little large for a team like Notre Dame that has found the way, as we discussed time and again throughout this season.
Okay. I think we have a vibe for this, and we also have to say, I honestly don't know exactly where we're going to be before the game tonight. I have not had an opportunity to go by the stadium yet. to get a lay of the land. So for our loyal Northerners who are here, not only invading the South, but bringing Northern weather with it, like people, I haven't gone outside yet today, but everybody I've been around is like, oh, it's cold out there, which is, and we just watched 2 snow games on the NFL weekend yesterday. People have noted that the Lions, and listen, we're here for all the North, but like, it's so funny to me that like all this stuff that's happening in the NFL right now, which is where all these guys want to get, it is so Northern focused right now. Right, there's snow in these games. It's the Bills and the Eagles and the Commanders, and the Chiefs are like kind of a border place for us, but like it's not like the deep South, certainly in Kansas City, Missouri, and what the Vikings and the Packers and the Lions were supposed to be. It is truly a Northern-centered NFL postseason experience, like across the board. We've talked about our tour of champions, that all these Northern champs at all of the levels of college football. Like, it's happening in the NFL too. The North, it's like we're not lying to you. The North runs this sport now.
I had not considered the NFL's place in that conversation. As Doug again shows you the logo and gets dangerously close to twerking.
Again, if you're listening on a podcast instead of watching, good for you.
Oh, also, this is what you're missing out on. No, the football runs through the North. We got to get the "Do They Play Ball Down There" T-shirts. We have our very nice logo T-shirts. I'm actually wearing it underneath this.
Oh, nice.
But we got to get the shirt that says "Do They Even Play Ball Down There?"
Yeah, we got a lot of merch opportunities this offseason. But it's just a reminder, and again, not that we were rooting against it, but we certainly saw some people, I think there was a crowd shot from the Lions game, that sometimes with the NFC North, the champion of that division, they call themselves the Kings of the North. And again, like, unfortunately for the Lions, they were a great story this year, but they lost in like only one set of kings standing, brother. I don't know what to tell you, right? I mean, like, reality is reality. So that's where we are. Our picks are in. I did get it in an elevator with 9 people on the way down here in my cape and my crown, and nobody said a word. So it's like, I don't know what the reception is, but I'm going to walk the streets of Atlanta. If you're out there and you see me, please say hello. I might have some T-shirts to give away, and we will be out there trying to see the folk, the good folks of the North who are here for this game. We will do our best to see as many of you who want to see this before the game. But let's do some stuff with our other friends, right? We've given our picks. You can go back and watch our entire Sunday show to take all that in. But we asked a bunch of other media members here what they think is going to happen in this college football national championship game. We asked some Ohio State beat people. We asked some Notre Dame beat people. We asked some national people. Here's what they had to say to Kings of the North. Bill Bender of the Sporting News here. Bill Bender, what's the key to the national championship game?
I think for Notre Dame, if they want to make this a game, they have to win on the turnover battle. They have to force at least multiple turnovers on Ohio State's side of the field. That means maybe Will Howard has to throw more than one interception, which he hasn't done. And then they have to cash in on those. So that's the big key for Notre Dame, would be winning the turnover battle, getting those early in the first half. They can't fall behind, Doug. They can't fall behind by 10 to 14 points, because if that happens, Ohio State will just either run the ball or they could pull away and turn this into a blowout, which some people are anticipating will happen. I don't think it'll be that bad, but that is going to be the key for Notre Dame.
How about like a strip sack at the end of the half that they cash in for a touchdown, like against Georgia? That's the kind of thing you're talking about, right?
Right. Well, as you know, Marcus Freeman's been compared a lot to Jim Tressel, and that style where they're winning with their defense, keeping teams in front, their special teams, which was huge in that Georgia game. They also ran back a kickoff for 95 yards. They get field goals from Mitch Jeter, who struggled during the regular season. And then the offense is just good enough. I mean, you read those box scores back in the Tressel days where you're like, how did they win this game? But it was, then you would be like, well, they controlled the clock. They didn't turn the ball over, and their quarterback was efficient. And Riley Leonard, much like Craig Krenzel back in that year, will have to make some plays with his legs. I put that rushing total around 70, 80 yards. If he does that and they get Price and Love going behind him, they'll have a chance.
Yeah. I brought up Craig Krenzel this week, too, as a comparison. What's your pick?
I picked Ohio State 27-17. These two teams, Notre Dame knows they can play with them, but they haven't had offense in those two games. And I think Ohio State's defense is better with Caleb Downs on top of all those veteran guys who have played in this game. Emotions will be high early. I think it'll be tight, but I can see Ohio State keeping them just at arm's length and maybe throwing in that touchdown late to cover the spread and win 27-17. I could see it at 34-17, but that's assuming Notre Dame turns the ball over. If they turn the ball over, they would be in big trouble.
Bill Bender from the Sporting News. Thanks for your time.
Hey, thank you.
Joined now by Austin Ward, the podcast, the Notebook postgame, which is a great inside look at what's going on with the Buckeyes. Always great from you, right?
I try to make it the best. I think it is very cool. I'm biased, but I think fans have enjoyed seeing the look of what it's like in a postgame scene, how the players are reacting, wins and losses, primarily wins. But I think it's cool. I think we've had a great time doing it this year, and would like to do one more that's about as celebratory as the Cotton Bowl is.
So look for that postgame on the podcast feed. Austin Ward, the key to this game for the Buckeyes and the Fighting Irish.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame, they want to play man coverage. That's who they are. That's their identity. They're the number 2 pass defense in the country, and they believe in what they do. I don't think that is a great matchup for Notre Dame. With their corners are good. They have one of the best safeties in the country, but Jeremiah Smith, Mecca, Carnell Tate, if you want to play man-to-man coverage on them, I think that's a matchup that favors Ohio State. But if Notre Dame has a path to victory, it will be their success in trying to slow down Ohio State and that talent at wide receiver.
All right, national championship pick then, Austin.
I have Ohio State winning this game 34-16. I think the limitations of the Notre Dame offense against Ohio State's top-ranked defense really gives me pause to think that the Irish can keep up. And the longer you go, a 4-quarter matchup, I think it favors the deeper roster, a more talented roster. I have all the respect in the world for Marcus Freeman. You and I have known him for a very long time. He's a great coach. He gets those guys to play hard. They're going to have a great plan. I don't think that they're going to be able to execute well enough on offense to beat Ohio State. And I think once you get into the 3rd and 4th quarter, Ohio State will assert its will on this game, and I think they'll pull away and win it comfortably.
All right. Thank you, Austin Ward. We'll see you post-game on the podcast feed on the Notebook.
Here with Pete Sampson, covers Notre Dame for The Athletic. Pete, what is your key or keys to tonight's national championship game?
I think they have to lean into Riley Leonard's legs really hard tonight. He's career high rushing carries was 18 last week against Penn State, 14 against Georgia. I think it's got to be between that because if he's running the ball efficiently, not only is Notre Dame keeping the ball, it's sort of putting Ohio State in the bind where, like, God, we don't have the ball. When do we get our shot to let it rip? And I think Notre Dame has to create that sense of frustration for Ohio State tonight to win. So Riley Leonard's legs, those are the best way to do that.
Do you foresee that happening? What's your game pick? How do you think it's going to play out?
I do think that's going to happen. I think that if Notre Dame can get out of the first quarter, then I think that's advantage Notre Dame. I picked Notre Dame 21-20 tonight. I think if you played this game 10 times, Ohio State would probably win 8 of them. But I do like the formula that Notre Dame's put on display all year. It's be aggressive on the ground, go for it on 4th down, play man coverage, be much smarter about it tonight than maybe you have against lesser opponents. And then you got to steal a possession somewhere. Maybe that's a fake punt. Maybe it's a blocked punt. I think Notre Dame's got to be sort of +2 in turnover margin tonight, and I would count a blocked punt as a turnover. I'd count a 4th down stop at midfield as a turnover. That's been how Notre Dame has lived all year. It's not like they have to step outside who they are tonight, I think, to compete with Ohio State and maybe pull a big upset.
He's Pete Sampson, covers Notre Dame for The Athletic, and the podcast, The Independent. Terrific Notre Dame podcast. Check that out, too. Thanks, Pete. Here with Adam King, 10 TV in Columbus. Adam, what is your key to Monday night's national championship game between Ohio State and Notre Dame?
You have to stop Riley Leonard's legs. If you make this team, I don't know if one-dimensional is the word because they still have Jeremiah Love, but if you can remove his ability to run the football, you change this game. And it's not about the big runs. It's not about him busting off a 40-yarder. It's the little runs that he does, the 4 yards, the 5 yards that extend drives that turn those, what would be a 5-play drive and balls back to, a 12-play drive, and they're in field goal range or score a touchdown.
So what is your game pick for the national title game?
38-20 is where I landed. I just think, I was looking last night.
Ohio State.
I was looking last night at the Oregon game back in 2014, and you almost forget that at one point it was 21-20 in the 3rd quarter. I think this game's going to be tight, but I think in the end Ohio State is the better team by a wide margin, and talent's going to win out, and talent is going to have Ohio State raising that trophy.
All right, Adam King from 10 TV in Columbus. Thanks, man.
Joined now by Bruce Feldman of The Athletic and everything else, right? What else? Like you do everything.
I don't do everything. I do Fox Sports mostly for TV, and I write for The Athletic. And I'm glad to be here.
You have a podcast. You have a podcast.
I do. I have a podcast with Stu Mandel, The Audible. I neglected to mention that. One of your old college friends. You guys were at Northwestern.
I won't tell Stu that you forgot your podcast show. Okay. Key to the game for the national title game.
Key to the game somehow. I don't know how they're going to be able to do it, but for Notre Dame to slow down all the skill talent they're going to see. This is not a Penn State team with 2 elite running backs and a great tight end and no receivers. This is a team with 2 elite running backs and elite receivers. And I think they're going to attack them. And this is a team that likes to play, as everybody knows, they like to play a lot of man coverage. They haven't seen anything like Jeremiah Smith this year. Probably the best receivers they've seen has been USC. USC did a lot of damage on them, and USC's nowhere near the level of these Ohio State guys.
So your pick?
My pick is Ohio State to cover. I think it's like 30-17. I could see us, and it wouldn't shock me if Notre Dame won, but it would surprise me just because they're really good on special teams. I do think they're really well coached. I think Marcus has done an awesome job, not just putting the staff together, but the way I think he's taken his foundation from Jim Tressel and really built on it over the last year or so. They have a quarterback who can run and who's dangerous, and they have an explosive running back in Jeremiah Love. But I just think Ohio State right now is too good. If Ohio State, if they play their A game, they're going to cruise. Even if they turn it over once or twice, I think they're good enough or dangerous enough to still overcome it.
Bruce Feldman, college football man about town. Thanks for the time.
Great seeing you guys.
Here with David Ubben from The Athletic. Dave, what do you see as a key to tonight's national championship game?
Notre Dame's got to find some offense. I don't know how they're going to move the ball, score the ball. I think defensively you got to give yourself some short fields and find a way to put yourself in position to score. And, when you get in the red zone, don't give up 7 to Ohio State. If you can do those things, you can get into it. I think if it's a tight game late, Notre Dame's got a great shot. I don't like Ohio State in those situations. You just got to make sure you don't get your doors blown off in the first half.
So what do you think is going to happen on Monday night? What is your score prediction?
I'm taking Ohio State 27, 13, something like that. But if it's 9-6 at halftime, I reserve the right to flip it and say I'm taking Notre Dame in the second half.
Whoa.
That's allowed. It's all game flow. Again, if it's a tight game in the second half, I do think Notre Dame's winning that ball game.
All right, he's David Ubben on The Athletic. Thanks, man. Tyler Horka, blueandgold.com. What is your key to Monday night's national championship game?
For Notre Dame, it's all about just doing what you've done to get here. It's the rock fights that you won against Georgia and Penn State. You've got to kind of make it that same type of game. So I'm not really going X's and O's here. I'm going stay in the game. Don't let Ohio – if Ohio State scores 2 touchdowns before you score at all, you lose. That wasn't really the case against Georgia or Penn State. You felt like you could stay in those games. Ohio State can get away from you. Don't let the game get away from you. Make it a rock fight because Notre Dame loves winning these rock fights. You listen to Marcus Freeman in the press conference. You listen to these players. They feel like they can play that type of game against anybody. But you listen to the Ohio State side of things, it's we're going to get out ahead and we're going to roll. I kind of liken this to the Texas game where I actually went to the University of Texas, so I follow their season closely. I think Notre Dame and Texas have very similar defenses, and you saw what Texas did to Ohio State to kind of frustrate the Buckeyes on offense a little bit in that game. I think Notre Dame will do that same type of thing, but they won't make the mistakes that Texas did. The 75-yard screen pass before the half, Notre Dame's not allowing that. The Jack Sawyer touchdown, you're not going to see that type of touchdown against Notre Dame. So eliminate those types of mistakes. Just don't make them at all. Stay in the game, and you'll be right there if you're Notre Dame.
So what's the score pick for you?
I've got Notre Dame winning 28-24, and I'm crazy. All the Ohio State fans are like, how the heck is Notre Dame going to score 28 points against a team that's only allowed one team to score 20 points against them all season? That was Oregon twice, obviously. I think Notre Dame scores on special teams or defense, and then at that point, you're saying, okay, Notre Dame only needs to get to 21. And I think the Notre Dame the offense can do that. Riley Leonard's a gamer. Jeremiah Love's going to be as healthy as he's been in the last month and a half. They're going to run the football better than Texas did, better than some of these teams that Ohio State has played, Tennessee. And, yeah, the game's going to be right there for Notre Dame if you get one of those special team scores, defensive scores, and then just kind of play your game.
Tyler Horka, check him out at blueandgold.com. Thanks, man.
Andy Staples, we were just remarking it looks like that we died and went to playoff heaven with our backdrop here. Yeah. How happy are we? Andy Staples from On3. What's the key to the national championship game?
Well, for Ohio State, just do what you've been doing. That's all you got to do. Do what you've been doing. Don't forget the Michigan stuff. Everybody keeps asking about it.
Yep.
But it's over. Yep. It's done. For whatever mental block exists for that game does not exist with anybody else.
Okay.
It's clear. For Notre Dame, middle-eight the hell out of them like you did Georgia.
Yeah,
that's
that's
really
pretty
good. They have got to find a way to make them make some mistakes and really suck 2 or 3 possessions out of the game if they can. And that's Riley Leonard running, Jeremiah Love running, and just hold the ball. Do not, because Ohio State is so explosive, and you saw it in the Cotton Bowl.
Yep.
Even when Jeremiah Smith was not having the greatest of games, they can still pop a 75-yard screen pass to Travion Henderson.
It was almost like a middle one for Notre Dame in the Georgia game.
Yes.
With that end of the half. I do think we've talked about this a lot, like that Oregon-Ohio State game in the regular season, Dan Landing with the onside kick that hit off Caleb Downs. It felt like, man, Oregon really stole a possession there.
Right.
It felt like Notre Dame stole some things. I think Ohio State, since the middle of the year, has been better on the margins of stealing things. Do you think Notre Dame has to steal a possession somewhere?
Either steal it or just hold the ball enough that you take. Because I think if Ohio State has the same number of possessions it had against Texas, same number of possessions it had against Oregon, there's no shot. You have got to limit the number of possessions. It's just what Michigan did. It's just what Nebraska did.
And it's hard. I think of the teams that Ohio State have played this year, the team that is probably most like Michigan, not exactly the same, is Notre Dame.
Right.
But
without the 2 first-rounders on the D-line.
And without the winged helmet rivalry mental side of it.
Like Notre Dame's offensive line is a lot better than Michigan's offensive line. But Notre Dame's defensive line is not. And Riley Mills, their best defensive tackle, is out. They lost him in the Indiana game. So that's the issue there. Like you said, there's no winged helmet.
Yep.
The gold helmet does good things to a lot of people, but doesn't do anything to Ohio State.
Yeah. So what's your pick?
I have Ohio State 21, Notre Dame 17.
Okay.
It's the Ohio State-Nebraska game.
Oh, which, like, it's funny, like the Ohio State-Nebraska game in the regular season, Ohio State fans are kind of like, I don't know about that. In the national title game, you'll take it 1,000 times out of 1,000. Yeah, you get a thing. You get to go to college football playoff heaven if you win that thing.
Oh.
Andy Staples from On3, thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks to everybody for joining us on that. As 2 people who picked Ohio State, I'm not that intrigued by anything anybody else says because I don't really care what anybody else thinks. So, like, no offense to those 8 people who gave their precious time to our show. I'm just kidding. I'm not really kidding, but I'm kidding. I don't listen to other college football podcasts. It's like, I know what I think. I don't care what other people think. Yeah. Is that wrong?
No, it's not wrong. I listen to other podcasts because I like to check myself and make sure I'm not missing things.
Oh, no, I don't want to check myself because I'm afraid of how checked I might be.
Oh, that's fair.
Obliviousness is my friend.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by the theory of the case for Notre Dame. And one in particular is the idea that Texas gave Ohio State a game while kind of screwing some stuff up, right? Like the screenplay at the end that Texas, it's not, I think it's not quite like Kirby Smart with 38 seconds left trying to run a play and Notre Dame getting a strip sack that sets up a touchdown against Georgia. But I think it's in the same area. Right? End of the half, just like make sure a gigantic, terrible thing doesn't happen, and then the other team does a gigantic, terrible thing to you.
Yeah.
The Jack Sawyer play at the end is a tremendous individual Jack Sawyer play, but also, we're talking, people's like, if Riley Leonard is pressured there, just because Quinn Ewers and Riley Leonard are different style quarterbacks, he's probably more able to try to get away from pressure there. Again, Jack Sawyer won very quickly. But the bottom line is, if you think Texas made some mistakes and still gave Ohio State a game, is that part of because there's a second part to it, but is that part of it compelling at all to you as the Notre Dame theory of the case?
I think I get it. I don't know. Is the other part that Ohio State made mistakes?
Yes.
Yeah. So like that's the part of it that's hard for me. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think Al Golden and the Notre Dame defense would allow themselves to be put in a position like Texas's defense was at the end of that first half. I think you make a good point about the differences in the quarterbacks for Notre Dame and Texas. Like, part of Quinn Ewers getting sacked there and losing the ball was that he was like trying to buy time to make a throw.
Yes.
And Riley Leonard, I don't think will do that. Riley Leonard will just start running, and maybe he outruns Jack Sawyer in that area, right? Or just gets tackled and doesn't fumble the ball. It's still a turnover on downs, but at least it's not a fumble return for a touchdown. So I think those are differences worth keeping in mind. I think like Notre Dame if resiliency is like the first thing you would say about Notre Dame, like sort of its soundness is probably the second thing, right? It's a very technically proficient team. It wins in the margins. It doesn't make a ton of mistakes, and like go into this game expecting that they might. Like I certainly wouldn't do that. So like my score is a little more lopsided, but that's just because I think Ohio State is going to find a gear more like it had against Tennessee and Oregon, and also not make the same mistakes that it made against Texas.
Yeah, but I don't like when you make the Notre Dame case. My reaction to a Notre Dame case is like, no.
Oh yeah, no.
It's like, oh well, no. I mean, like that could happen.
Yeah.
That could happen. And well, our good friend Ari Wasserman, I think, makes a good point about that. And there's it's like with anything, and I talk about this a lot on the show, on the betting show with Tyler Shoemaker. It's like I like making bets where I can be wrong and still win, because there's multiple pathways in life. Being wrong but still kind of being right, very helpful. And I think there maybe that applies to this game, right? That when you think about pathways.
I think so. I don't know that there are a bunch of pathways for Notre Dame, right? But they do exist. Like I think we need to acknowledge that.
No, absolutely.
And I do feel like maybe some folks have been a little dismissive of the notion that there's at least one pathway. I think there's more than one. It's just that, like, Ohio State I think has a few, but Ari talked about that a little bit.
Yeah. So let's go to that. You talked to your friend of mine, Ari Wasserman from On3, about his predictions for Monday night.
It's a national championship game. We couldn't do a breakdown without friend of the program, Ari Wasserman, returning. Ari, I feel like you've been fighting the good fight for Notre Dame on social media all season, sometimes getting a little bit of crap for it. What's it like for you to see the Irish here in the national title game, though?
Well, I've been opinionated in the last week of who I think is going to win this game, which I'm sure we'll get to. And, like, Notre Dame fans are, like, hurt. They're like, why are you off the bandwagon now? And it's like, well, they're playing a team that I think just has better players. And, like, I've kind of cooled down on the Stars Matter propaganda, I guess. But at the same time, too, that wasn't because I changed my mind on what was important. It was because the sport changed. But in this specific instance, like, we're back for a game, right? Like maybe one last time, the one final dance, but like it has felt good because like I know that you guys all year have been talking about Northern football but like anybody who didn't respect Notre Dame this year just wasn't watching the games. Like they were good and they were built in a way that they could compete. And I think that they're able to compete and will be able to compete for the foreseeable future. And like, I don't know, we worked together for a long time. You like write columns in your head before you get to the game. Like if Notre Dame loses by a ton tonight, I know exactly that I'm just going to write that this feels like the last two playoff appearances and the BCS championship game, but this is also the last time they may have to face a team that has this many good players on the same team. So like, I'm happy to have been along for the ride. I know you guys knew that Notre Dame had a really good chance to beat Georgia, and the spread of that game was won for a reason. Like they're a really good football team. And I didn't actually think it was particularly that crazy to choose them to win. Like everybody's like, oh, how did you see it? It's like, it wasn't that hard, right? Like you were there, you were with me on that, weren't you?
So I've changed my mind too, because I had Notre Dame winning the national title when the playoff field came out. That was my pick. But I also didn't expect Ohio State to be here.
Yeah.
So now I'm doing the same kind of flip flopping that you're doing because of I'm in Stars Matter mode. Maybe this is your last dance for Stars Matter, but it is clear that I think Ohio State has a depth of talent that Notre Dame, while very talented, I think is not quite up to snuff. But
last year or 2 years ago, I can't remember, with Doug, he had me on the show, or we had him on our show, or I was on your show. I can't remember. But like, I was always programmed of like 1 through 85, 1 through 85, 1 through 85. And he goes, well, actually 1 through 85 doesn't matter as much as like 1 through 40 or 1 through 28, because those are the players who are actually playing. And, from a depth standpoint, it mattered 1 to 85 to get to that point. But in that game, who are the 30 players who get on the field? And it's like, if you do the 1 through 30 game right now, it's like not even close in terms of like top end talent. And like, to me, that's kind of the thing. It's like we go into so many of these games trying so hard to like envision how it's going to be close in our head. And like a lot of times they're just not close. So, maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe Notre Dame is much better than even I gave them credit for. And we'll get a good game on Monday night. But like sometimes when you're trying to figure out what the most reasonable conclusion is. It's probably just the most likely thing that could happen. So I don't know.
You asked Marcus Freeman a question at Media Days, which I think was getting kind of to the heart of what it would have to look like if Notre Dame were to win. What do you think that would look like?
I think that everybody thinks the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, does anybody think that Notre Dame's path is any different than slow the game down, run the ball well, stop the run, make it a slosh fest, and try to win in the fourth quarter, like 21-17 or something like that? I don't know. It's just like, and this is what I said to you in Dallas for the Texas game too. It's like, sports writers are stupid. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what's going to happen in this game. Nobody in there knows if we knew what was going to happen in the game, we'd be living in Vegas and laying on a raft in a pool right now. So when everybody collectively thinks the same thing, that makes me uneasy, because that means we're probably going to be wrong. And I feel like to a certain extent, we all thought the same thing about the Texas game. We were kind of wrong, and then it still turned out to get there in the end. So I don't know, like, is this game 34-31 in the third quarter because we all just are overthinking it? Or is it, like, to me, I think that Notre Dame's path is so narrow to win, which is why I chose a blowout, because once that gets away from you, you're not equipped. You either play that game from the beginning for 4 quarters or you get your ass kicked. Like, I don't think there's anything in between there. And I just don't think that they can play that game. It's just too close of a needle to thread.
Yeah, we'll get to your pick in a second, but I want to ask you this, because Doug and I were talking about this after the Texas game, that I think it was good for a lot of people, including Ohio State, to see Ohio State win a game against a team that good when it didn't play its best. Do you think that, obviously Ohio State can win by a blowout, but say Notre Dame does make it a game that's played more on its terms, do you think Ohio State can still win that kind of game?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, because their terms is a one-possession game in the fourth quarter. And Ohio State's got good players, so they can make a play. And I think it probably does feel – I listened to your guys' show. I heard what you said about, like, the fact that they were able to win a game against a really good team. You have to say that, because they did it against Nebraska, and they did it against Penn State to a certain extent, right? But, like, to be socked in the face and 1 yard away from being in a tie game against Texas and then win the game the way they did, I think is, like, the exact opposite of what Ryan Day's been criticized for. So, yeah, I do. I think Ohio State has way more avenues to win the game. But, like, at the same time, too, if Notre Dame is good enough to get it to a 3-point game in the fourth quarter, then I would probably pick Notre Dame to win that game in that circumstance if it gets to that point, because Notre Dame, like, that's their plan. They're executing. I think Ohio State would probably be tighter. They're not used to that as much. Like, Notre Dame wants that. They're craving that. So, but, yes, I think Ohio State can win in 20 different ways, and I think Notre Dame can win in, like, 1.
So what's going to happen on Monday night?
I think it's going to be a hard-hitting first quarter. I think Notre Dame might even score first. But I think that Ohio State will score multiple times in the late first quarter to early second quarter, get out to a lead, and then it's going to get away from Notre Dame. I think that the number here that everybody is forgetting about isn't the spread, it's the team total. Mm-hmm. Like, we get so distracted by Jeremiah Smith and all these different things of, like, oh, how flashy Emeka Egbuka is and Will Howard running the ball. It's like, their defense is awesome. Like, they've got the best defense in college football. I don't think that Notre Dame's going to score more than 17 points. So I've got 38-17 with the game getting away from them in the second half.
All right, there it is. He's Ari Wasserman. Check him out. Is it Andy and Ari or Ari and Andy? Andy and Ari. All right. Well, for this show, we'll call it Ari and Andy on 3. He's my best friend in the whole wide world, and we love him here on Kings of the North.
Enjoy the game tonight, guys.
Check it out.
All right, thanks, bud. Yeah.
Thanks to Ari for that. We're watching the package here, and Bill, you noted that we'll know when it's over because it's after the hug.
Yeah, every conversation that Ari and I have starts and ends with a hug.
Yeah. Because you're just brothers like that.
We are.
The idea that it's interesting because we've talked a lot about how we think college football has fundamentally changed, how that has helped a lot of northern teams, has brought the South down. The idea that this is sort of the end of the era of any team being a recruiting monster that has as many 5 stars on its roster that matter, like Ohio State does with the 8 highly ranked dudes who came back for year 4. Do you think this is it for that type of team?
I don't know. Like what Ohio State has done, and I guess what Michigan did before that, in using NIL funds to retain all that talent, feels like a bit of a new horizon. Like that, and we talked about Penn State maybe being on the verge of doing that. I think like Illinois even is maybe doing like a lesser version of that. So that's like a whole other world of roster construction that I've never really considered. But I think that's another pathway. If we want to talk about pathways to keeping a roster like that together. Obviously, you can bring in transfers. So I think I think we will see more like quote unquote super rosters that just maybe will be constructed in a couple different facets, whereas in the past it's just been like, you know, Alabama and Georgia are recruiting machines, and those guys just cycle through the program year after year after year. I think you can still build a roster that I think looks like Ohio State's, but you have to do it a little differently now.
Dan Wetzel brought this up when he was on the other day. Like, you know, if you look at several years ago, how many of the top 100 recruits in the country went to the 5 best programs versus how many it is now, and I think it's about half as many are consolidated at the very top. So this Ohio State team is interesting because potentially it might be the end of something, but also it is the continuation of the new era, because it is, yes, they have this mega recruiting class that is fueling it, but also the key to it is that that mega recruiting class was retained for a 4th year. So it is so much like what Michigan did last year, but it is also a bunch of 5-star guys. So I do think it's sort of 2 things at once happening for this team.
Yeah, it is, and it's going to be fascinating once Ohio State gets past that, because there's not a mega recruiting class behind it that we're waiting for. There actually aren't that many Ohio State guys who have a decision to make whether or not they're going to go to the NFL draft. So the math in the offseason is a little different for Ohio State, but it just depends on what kind of window you're in. Like Penn State, I think, is in that window. Michigan was in that window a year ago. They'll be, I can't think of a team off the top of my head, but maybe like Washington could be in a window like that, like 2 years from now, right? So it is fascinating. I think it needs to be like studied a little more to see, you know, what exactly the impact of that is. But it seems like Michigan and Ohio State are putting out 2 pretty impressive data points with it so far.
We're pretty good, I think, in college football at measuring intake. I mean, certainly the recruiting services have shown that over the years, and I think, you know, all the places, 24/7 and On3 and everybody else who has the transfer portal, class rankings, that kind of thing, we're not very good at measuring retention right now.
Yeah.
And we talk so much about the in specifically, and we talk about the out vaguely, but it is hard to judge because sometimes it's like, oh, like, you know, this guy was our starter, and now he's gone. Cam Ward hurt Washington State by leaving, although they got John Mateer was ready to go, which is always one of them. Sometimes it's like, man, sometimes you feel like players are indispensable. And it's like, no, I don't know. They're somebody else. There are indispensable players. I don't know if we can measure. Can we find, because part of it is if you said, okay, and we always talk about like returning starters. So that's also talking about starters that left. But the hard thing to gauge is how many guys did you lose in the portal that were going to start in a year or two that maybe didn't play much right now, but you really kind of wanted to keep around, versus there's a lot of guys that leave teams that are kind of like, well, I mean, honestly, you probably were never going to start here.
Yeah.
So good for you, but the team's okay too. We have to figure out a way to measure that.
Yeah, and I don't even know that pro sports does that tremendously well either.
Yeah.
Like even the off-season roster construction in the pro leagues is a lot of biggest free agent moving to this place, or obviously draft stuff. It's never like, boy, this team ponied up the cash to keep their best player, right? Like,
right.
You know, I think maybe in sports in general we need to talk about that a little more, but it's so new in college football that I think we've all yet to like process the impact of that.
Yeah. So we'll do that in the off season. What we'll do today is get ready to cover the national championship game. We will be there tonight. We will be there live post game. We appreciate all you guys being here with us now, and we hope you join us after the game. And then we will also be back on Tuesday. This show got up slightly later than noon. There's just a lot of moving parts when you're on the road and there's a million things going on. We have travel plans tomorrow. We think the show tomorrow is maybe going to be a little earlier. Do you think we're going to put it up earlier or just record it earlier and still put it up at noon? Again, planning the show on the show, which is great content.
I don't know the answer to that.
Chief Content Officer, put on the spot by a man in a cape. This is how we operate here. Bottom line is, if you follow us, if you are subscribed to our podcast feed, if you follow us on YouTube, if you get notifications and subscribe on YouTube, we'll be there on Tuesday. They have like a 9 a.m. follow-up news conference, usually with the winning head coach and usually the offensive and defensive MVPs. So we will react to that. We will be at that, react to that, and have like a final show to really finish off this season. And then guess what? Like, then we'll be into the off season. So like, don't go anywhere. This isn't it. It's not like in college, college football is 365, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Go out the portal and NIL, yeah, always.
Yeah. So we have a lot, and we have a lot of stuff. Like, we have not comprehensively wrapped our 28 Northern teams. So there's stuff on that. I think that we want to have a final analysis of here's what they did. Why did they do this? How replicable is it? Who's coming back? Who are they losing? How old were they? How young were they? Like, we got to do this for everybody else. That's the 26 other Northern teams that aren't in the national championship game.
We have to. But that can wait. Because we got a Northern National Championship, buddy.
Yeah, no. We probably won't do that Wednesday.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the Wednesday show.
Probably not.
No. Might take a little nap. Thanks, as always, to you guys for being here. We're incredibly grateful. We hope to see some of you diehards who were able to make it here out and about on the streets of Atlanta and in the parking lot. And I think I'm not taking the cape off until I get into the press box. And the question then is, do I even keep it on in the press box? Like, do I watch the game in the cape and the crown?
It's your life, man.
But it's my life, but I'm also sitting next to you.
That's a fair
so
point.
It's also your life.
Yeah, that's true. We'll feel it out. See what the vibes are.
He's not going to let me wear the cape in the press box. That's okay. We'll see you guys. Thanks, as always, to producer Mike for making us look good and sound good. Thanks to all the media members who took time out of their busy mornings to join us here on KOTN. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. We will see you tonight after the game. Oh, the other thing is, we might not go live like 30 seconds after the game like we traditionally do, because we know that like the winning fan base is going to want to watch the trophy presentation and stuff, right?
Yeah, and I think we want some time to be down on the field too, to kind of soak that all in, maybe talk to some people while we're down there and get that in the show. So maybe, I don't know, 10 to 15 minutes after the game we'll be live.
Maybe 20. We're going to be there. We're going to be there. So just as always, hang with us. We're going to be talking about a Northern champion, which is the bottom line in all of this. We are going to be talking about a Northern national champion, which is kind of what we told you all year. See you tonight. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.